I am.
Sorry, I was muted. I was talking. Of course, you didn't hear me. Sorry about that. I haven't done any of the homework. I have been so busy. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It's all good. Do what we can do. How's Elaine doing later on?
She reached out today and
Hey,
said
how's it going?
she's doing better, but it's been really, really hard on her. Probably
Yeah,
she hadn't seen her nephew for 14 years because they live in Canada. So, but they just ended up having a really good connection while he came to visit. I guess he was on a biking trip, so he was there a couple days, then he came left and came back a couple more days and left and came back a third time. So she had spent more time with him and then she had in a long time. And she said it almost made it worse because they really, hadn't seen that much of each other. But
yeah.
anyway,
Were they close in age?
uh say that again. Oh
Were
gosh,
they close in age?
hang on a second. Sorry. Oh, I can't make this stop. Um, he- I couldn't understand the question. Were they close in age? It was her nephew. Sorry. No, he was
Okay.
only 26. And it was a motorcycle accident, which is just terrible. Like the way he the way he died was just terrible. He probably died instantly, but it was horrible. A lady, she put on her brakes. It was an SUV in front of him, and she put on her brakes suddenly, like real sporadically. So he swerved to miss her, and then she swerved into him and pushed him into a semi.
Whoa.
Yeah, terrible.
Uh,
Mm, mm, mm.
So it has made, Elaine just literally physically, she was taking IV fluids and just because she was so devastated, it was
yeah.
making her violently like sick, vomiting, I ended up making her the same thing I made for Sabbath. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway,
That's
terrible.
terrible.
Yep, it's terrible.
How are you, Duran? How you
Hey,
been?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
No complaints. No complaints.
Okay.
I'm on vacation, so everything's good.
You say
Oh,
you're on vacation?
vacation. That's great.
Nice. You're going to your parents' house for their lake house? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, we're gonna leave in the morning.
Are they going too, your parents?
No, my dad just had knee surgery,
Oh,
so he's locked in the house for a little while. So
yeah. Oh, well, I hope y'all have a good time. Is Meg able to go
no, she's gonna have to stay home and
with the pets, the animals?
manage the animals. Yeah.
Yeah. How are
Keith, how
the
are you?
how are the dogs doing?
Dogs are getting along.
Good.
All right.
Amelia asked me to find out about you remember the stuff that she brought to Sabbath a few weeks ago? I think there was a cupcake thing and a bowl that
Yeah,
had
we got it.
you have it? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get it back to you. We're not gonna keep it.
No, I told you all are so good about that she didn't have to worry. But I just feel bad because I hadn't gotten it yet from you. But it's all good.
Yeah, I guess I should have just ran it over to your house.
No, it's all good.
Bob, Laura, Keith, welcome.
Hello.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing good.
right, well, it is 7. We'll slowly dive into this. Welcome everybody to our second week of Jural Assembly handbook training. We're gonna cover chapters 11 through 20 tonight. Anybody have a chance to get a hard copy printed out?
I have one.
You have to. Hello, Anita.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. All right. How things going?
So I had to miss the last meeting. I think, are the Jural Assembly meetings gonna be at 7 on Sunday nights? Is that the plan?
The training meeting,
Okay.
at least for now, that's correct. And once we start the pillar building process, if this works for everybody, we'll just keep it. Otherwise, we'll work on something else, but we're trying this for now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and screen share. Can I get a volunteer to read the Bivens decision for me, please?
We need a couple of people on this. I can read it if you want. Hang on, let me get my computer closer. I'm not muted, am I?
No, you're good. Thanks.
I'll go ahead and read it. Bivens decision reading. This meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden. Well, for some reason, I can only see part of it. Hang on. I think I can't make it. Hang on a second. Sorry. Okay. Is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency or public agency of the federal, state, county, city, or township agencies present? Additionally, are there any U.S. citizens or citizens of the United States present? Anyone who is here under false pretenses, anyone who is working for any foreign government, including the territorial United States or municipal United States, anyone who is being paid or coerced to be here must fully disclose their presence and purpose now or leave the premises. If they subsequently show up as federal witnesses, they are discredited for failure to disclose. Is there any response to the Bivens decision? Is there any response to the Bivens decision? Is there any response to the Bivens decision?
Thanks for that, Ann. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Once again, welcome everybody. Jural Assembly handbook training. Purpose for tonight's training, in the words of Aunt Anna in the first chapter of the book, is to know basic definitions and oppositions and roles, so that everyone understands what they are doing, that should be doing, and why. So that is our purpose. That's why we're here, to have a better understanding as a group of what it is we'll be doing once we start building our pillar. The goal, once we're done with this training, is to place the Kentucky Jural Assembly on solid foundation to begin building our Jural Assembly pillar. So once again, I talked about last week, individual versus group knowledge. We all have to know our roles individually, but none of us standing alone can accomplish the goal of building this pillar. We have to do it as a group. But the group is only as strong as its individual members, right? So if there's only one of us who's done the work and the study, then as a group, we're not going to have as much success as we could. So tonight's training is about saying as a group that we've accomplished the basic understanding. But individually, we have to dive into this and do the work on our own time. And ROE for tonight, raise your hand, ask questions. Please, this is your training and mine. Let's make it our training. And so if something's unclear or if you want to explore something more, please raise your hand or just interrupt as necessary, and we'll talk about it. I've got about 45 slides. Hopefully we'll get done in an hour, but if we need more time than that, no problem. Any questions on the purpose, goal, ROE? All right, diving right in. Chapter 11 was about the committees of safety. I found this pretty interesting. I found some other information online. So the idea is talking about what the conditions were like at the revolution. And I'm just going to go ahead and read a couple paragraphs from chapter 11. I promise this is the only time I'm going to read tonight, but I thought it kind of set the stage for the chapter pretty well. And it says, in the contentious days prior to the Declaration of Independence, our once relatively homogeneous communities were split between the Patriots and the Tories loyal to England. This split caused great social unrest and disease that we can scarcely understand today, and affected people even in their religious practices. Just as the Church of England separated from the Catholic Church over political and social differences, the American Anglican Church was split in half. Patriots became Episcopalians and Tories remained Anglican. I mention this only to demonstrate how deeply felt and how fundamentally disruptive the revolution was. Suddenly there were spies and enemies in every corner. Your dear friends who were Tories no longer spoke to you and vice versa. People you had known and trusted and depended upon all your life for vital services would no longer do business with you over the issue of independence. So as our founders were coming together to form our great nation, they had to look over their shoulder, I suppose, quite often. There were folks having their homes burned, their families injured, even killed, because of the split. And so as they met, they formed these committees of safety. Basically, like she says, it was a spy network, and they had stockpiles of guns, ammo, food, medical supplies, tools. And their responsibilities were to provide a safe location for the meetings, to remove disruptive participants, be aware of suspicious activities, and help organize the state militia. And so at that point in time in our history, there's definite need for these people to set up these make sure that these meetings were safe. But Anna says the committees of safety should not engage in any activity that can be misconstrued as anti-government, violent, or threatening. And the conditions are now fundamentally different than they were. Anna says, I am not against the principle of having a committee of safety associated with each state drill assembly, but she advises that we are not at war. There is no intention or need for us to engage in any great struggle other than a mental and spiritual and emotional one. So as far as the committees of safety are concerned, my opinion and my thought on it is it's a tool that we can utilize if we find that it's necessary and we can put it together. However, as Anna says and recommends, probably not something that we have to have as we start building our pillar. Any questions on the committee of safety or anything else to add? Anyone have any other further knowledge on the history of the committees of safety? Welcome, Justin. All right, moving on, chapter 12. Chapter 12 is about record keepers. These are the recorders in the Jural Assembly.
What's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you now. Welcome.
Hey, can you hear?
Yeah, you're kind of cutting in and out.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
My only thing would be committee of safety would be to look out for jury members and witnesses and stuff of that nature. But of course, we're early in the ball game. But are you?
Yeah, that's kind of the impression that I got from Anna, is that it's there and we can utilize it if we feel that it's necessary. And by all means we can. However, I don't think at the beginning it's critical to set one up as we begin. Record keepers, each state Jural Assembly needs to elect a recorder, and I highlighted elect because it's a position that needs to be elected. The recorder function is to create and preserve the public and private records upon which the legitimacy and proof of the proper functioning of the Jural Assembly depends. So everything we do as a Jural Assembly, in order to establish our credibility and prove to everyone that we're doing the right thing and doing the things that need to be done, has to be recorded. Proof of due diligence, right? The duties of the recorder: keeping records related to the Jural Assembly and its members in order and secure, collecting, securing, and distributing and so the record of origin of the Jural Assembly members, that's basically your status correction paperwork, right? Your 1779, 928, all of that. The recorder is supposed to have a copy of everyone's status correction paperwork in their possession to prove the standing of our jurors. And the recorder also records times, dates, forums, meeting minutes, and should be maintained by the recording secretary and the recorder's office. So that's a little bit about the recorder and their duties. Any questions on chapter 12? Moving right along, chapter 13, it's titled Judges, Justices, and Hired Jurists. Judge Anna blows the whistle on the whistleblowers. There was a lot of information in this chapter. And I kind of pulled out a few things that stuck out to me. The biggest thing I think to realize was this federal block grants, and how our elected representatives really let us down. And she says that it happened in the 60s. So many of those operating our counties, so the people we elected, we put up front to operate our counties in the 60s. I mean, that's pretty recent. Took the bait of these federal block grants and elected to incorporate the unincorporated counties they were working for. Talk about poisoning the well for us. You know, they handed over our sovereignty in exchange for racketeering kickbacks, and we were none the wiser, right? And so functioning as incorporated persons, they had no authority to give away our counties, right? We're on the land and soil. Now they've basically said that they want to incorporate. Now they're a corporation as a person, and they didn't even have the authority to do that, but they did it anyway. Land and soil jurisdiction of this country does not allow us to operate in incorporated and unincorporated capacity at the same time, right? We can't have dual citizenship as free Americans. We're on the land and soil, and that's where we need to be. All the people you see inhabiting what appear to be your courts are hired jurists, sheriffs, judges, justices. The service, and I put that in italics because it's it's not really a service, right? There are service providers, they're supposed to provide us services, but they've committed fraud and they've turned that around and they've corrupted it. But what they are providing tends to be racketeering aimed at fleecing the actual people out of their assets for the benefit of their corporations. But Anna says to reclaim your natural unincorporated political status, which is what we've all done. Repopulate your land and soil jurisdiction. Become members of the state Jural Assembly. Occupy your vacated public offices, justice of the peace, state justices, and the state judges. That's how we fix this. They did a bad thing to us, but we have it in our power as status corrected individuals to make it right. So that's what we're doing tonight. Questions on chapter 13? Chapter, oh, whatever. Y'all see that? Chapter 14 was kind of the meat and potatoes of the chapters here. A lot of information, but it's titled Sheriffs, Militias, and Marshals. She starts off by talking about sheriffs and the importance of the sheriff office, the land and soil sheriff. For us, and the difference between what we have, what we're supposed to have, and what the de facto has, right? We're supposed to have a public peacekeeping official on the land and soil. What we've got now at on the sea maritime jurisdiction is a law enforcement officer. So we have officials, they have officers. And Anna notes that the peacekeeping official, what we're supposed to have, our land and soil sheriff, outranks anybody else. And like she said earlier in the Jural Assembly handbook, is that county sheriff, nobody has higher rank than he does. So it's a really powerful office. Go ahead, Justin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'd like to make one point on the sheriff. You know, we're all self-governing. And so the sheriff is a peacekeeper, of course, but one of his main responsibilities is to take reports for our courts. So we have the responsibility, if somebody comes on our land and our property, to defend it ourselves. We have the right to do that. What they did back in the 60s as well when they corporatized is they made everybody, oh, I got to call the cops. I got to call the cops. I got to call the cops, right? And so therein lies the rut. You get the cops involved, that's the corporate entity, and now you've contracted unknowingly. So the sheriffs are supposed to, when you call the sheriff and say, help me, somebody's breaking into my house, the sheriff is supposed to say, Justin, you probably need to handle that because I'm like 30 minutes out, bud, that type thing. And then when he gets there, he takes a report for the clerk of court on our courts. So I just wanted to point that out, as in, yeah, sheriff's a peacekeeper, but I think it gets missed in all the quagmire of information that he works for the, well, I don't want to step on my toes, but I hope y'all got the picture. I yield.
No, that's interesting because it basically sounds like what you're saying is the de facto created yet another tool to make it easy for us to incorporate ourselves, right?
Exactly
Just like
right.
Yeah, and call the cops. So they created a tool that looks great. Hey, this is a person that's going to be able to help me if I need it. But by calling the cops and involving them, you're stepping into their jurisdiction, and it's exactly what they want.
Yep. And have killed self-governing to be, and peaceful self-governing, to where men and women should be able to resolve their issues peacefully amongst themselves. Instead of that, it's automatic reaction, call the cops, get the cops involved. So it's a double whammy, and so to speak.
It's programming.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And we're all victims of it. Every last one of us.
you're exactly right. That's good. Thanks for that, Justin. That's good.
Hey, I got a question.
Good, Keith.
On being a sheriff now, if a sheriff is corporation sheriff, like in a county, can they also be a peacekeeper in our group?
From what I understand from Anna's book about jurisdiction, she talks about later the corporate, the de facto sheriff has the capability to operate land and soil jurisdiction. So he has the ability to do both, I think. But I don't know how that plays out. He has to take off one hat and put on another. I mean, he can't do both at the same time. Does that sound correct, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, Keith, I would look at it as if, just like Tom mentioned in the beginning about the Revolutionary War in chapter 11, that's just like what we're in right now. That's why when we read the Declaration of Independence, you could tell word for word what's happening now. But it's going to be a personal decision. That's nothing that we have rules and regulations on. That's going to be a personal decision on that man or woman serving as that corporate sheriff to say, okay, I see what I've been a part of. Do I really want to be a part of it anymore? And do I have a higher calling to be an actual peacekeeper and not a policy enforcer or some county attorney's little puppet, for lack of a better term? You see what I'm saying? That's going to be an individual choice. And that's where we come in to a point as far as, we need to do outreach and stuff like that, but we also live by attraction, the law of attraction. So the further we get into this and the further that we are, what am I trying? Good at it, for like we're the more we progress, the more people is going to see, hey, what they got going on is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Just like all of us has come to the realization.
Yeah, I think if it's our last resort, if we don't have anybody that steps up and wants to be a sheriff, and the de facto sheriff says he's willing to do that, that's better than nothing. But I think it's way more beneficial to have our own land and soil sheriff operating for us to relieve any confusion.
Yeah, I know for a fact that there's sheriff deputies that have done the status correction process and are actually working for the Continental Marshal Service. So they're like postal area chiefs or something like that. So yeah, it's just a jurisdictional thing is what it comes down to, Keith. I yield.
Do you have your hand up, Laura?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I believe that Nick and Duran both want to be sheriffs. They've both put interest in that. I yield.
Yeah, I think I sent out the training that Joe had recommended. Ron, did you have a chance to look at that training?
Yes, I did.
You had a
The
chance to
little
look at it?
sheriff. It's a hard read though, because both pages are on it, and it's rather an older book.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder, Laura. I forgot that Nick had voiced interest in that, so we asked some candidates. So that's good. Duran said he had to go, so all right. And Laura, you want to move the meeting up to 6?
Just for Duran, I mean, that way he could be here, especially with him, having interest in being a sheriff.
Okay, we'll talk about that at the end if we have time. Meeting time. All right. Let's see. Where was it? All right. So land jurisdiction sheriff. responsible for the enforcement of public and organic law, protection of property, persons, guaranteed rights of the people. He only acquires godlike powers, and I think the reason I had to put that in there is because he's the top dog. He is the highest official in the state on that county. He only acquires this power when there's an active qualified state Jural Assembly present in the state. So no Jural Assembly, no sheriff. On the other side of the fence is law enforcement officer. Anna makes this comparison with a floor walker at Walmart as far as real legitimate authority goes, except when their activities involve directly protecting the U.S. mail, infrastructure related to the mail, or railroads and their infrastructure. So that's a difference between a law enforcement officer and a sheriff. Anything else on sheriffs before we move on to the militias? All right, Anna breaks out the difference between state militias versus state militias. State militia is manned by state citizens who are members of the state Jural Assembly. They do community safety and preparedness, firearm safety, marksmanship, first aid, and they train in one or more specialties. Anna talks a little bit about the Swiss cantons. So over in Switzerland, everybody who's 18 goes into military for 2 years, and they serve. I mean, unless you have some kind of medical issue, if you're Swiss and you're 18 years old, you're going into the military. There's no other way around it. And so every Swiss person over there is trained in some kind of militia-oriented, marksmanship, first aid, all that stuff. So that's kind of what I think we were supposed to be like at one point, based on that Swiss model that she talks about. On the other side of the fence, the state militia, she says that they are quasi-military or paramilitary organizations manned by U.S. citizens. Right? And this was just for my reference to figure out what the difference between quasi and para was. So quasi means that it resembles or has a likeness to something, and para means it's not part of the official or legitimate armed forces. And so a state militia. So if let's say Ohio had the de facto, the corporate state of Ohio had a militia, it's not the real thing. It's not our land and soil state militia. And it was interesting that she included the National Guard as a quasi or paramilitary organization, since it's corporate de facto. All right, moving on to the marshals. Anna lists federal marshals versus U.S. marshals, the provost marshal, and the marshal at arms. The federal marshal, that's land and soil jurisdiction. They serve in districts that are defined by the Postal Service, international land jurisdiction officials. Their job is to intercept, prevent, prosecute crimes peculiar to interstate or international land jurisdiction venues. They work on the trafficking of people and contraband, kidnapping, bank robberies, and they are hired, not elected. And they're employed by the Federation of States. Anna says in 2015, they had a new group of federal marshals, and to avoid confusion, they renamed them the Continental Marshal Service. And then she says, but almost immediately more confusion arose because so I don't have a whole lot more information about the origin of the Continental Marshals. Justin, do you know more about why they chose that name, or what the additional confusion was?
I do not. I know they deal in most postal area courts is their wheelhouse. But I don't know why they named them Continental Marshals. I'm sure there's an article on it if you search it.
Yeah. Provost Marshal, I don't really know anything about Provost Marshal. I was in the military for 20 years and I don't think I ever ran across Provost Marshal in the Marine Corps. So I was a little interested about it. The Webster's definition is an officer who supervises the military police of a command. And the way I kind of think about it is he's the representative between the civilian, either police force or sheriff, and that military base. The police on the military base, the officers there on the base. So, Justin, do you have any more insight into Provost Marshal and what their role was supposed to be and kind of how it functions on an Army base?
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. They're the person we as civilians as in non-combatives on the mercenary warfield, on the battlefield, right? Because this is a mercenary conflict that we're caught in. And so the provost marshal is supposed to be, it's actually provo, I think, but it's here there, but he's supposed to be the one we as civilians, Americans, members of the general public are supposed to be able to go to and voice a concern, and his military is supposed to handle it. Because keep in mind, the military is supposed to protect us and our assets. All right. So when any corporation that they can handle trespasses against us, then we're supposed to be able to throw out that Regulation Z flag, which is the black and white flag, right? And mark our stuff as private property, not to be taken in conflict, right? It's not part of your deal. It's been deemed peaceful, I guess you would say. But no, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. He's a liaison, and they've corporatized it so much that they've taken it from, like a full bird colonel position is the lowest rank that it used to be, to butter bars, which is second lieutenants, first lieutenants, and now they're civilians. There's not even military running it no more. So, yep, just another avenue they've taken away.
So if a civilian had a concern about something that the military was doing, going to a regular land and soil sheriff wouldn't do anything for us. We would have, so that provost would have to be available, number one, to civilians and have an interest in solving any kind of problem that they had.
Just around that base. So take Fort Knox, for instance. Okay. You know how Fort Knox, it's got gates and stuff you've got to go through, but a lot of the community around there, the people that are working on those bases live in those communities. So when they get out in those communities, the sheriff or our continental marshals or whoever we have as peacekeeping officials in the assembly are to get with that provost marshal hand in hand with that member of the general public and say, hey, look, here's what your person did to you, whether he's on duty or not. But the sheriff still on that county, Hardin County, the sheriff still is the top dog because the military works for us. Short and sweet.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. So the sheriff of Hardin County can tell anybody on Fort Knox what he needs them to do, I guess, right?
I would say, with respect, I'm kind of talking out of school somewhat. I would say there was some type of not democratic process, but kind of a formal process that could be. That's what Anna talks about, the systematic change. Right now they have control. We need to change the system. But it would be an amicable understanding that the sheriff, okay, we need to listen to him. He's been elected. He's a representative of the people, and we work for the people right now. So that's my general understanding of it, though. I could be wrong. It'd be a question for Joe Hayes on like a militia meeting or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks, Justin.
Amen.
So Anna says provost marshal is supposed to be a coordinator, kind of like we talked about between the Federation and the military. And so there are occasions when the provost marshal needs to run interference or coordinate activities between local state officials, county sheriffs, state militia leaders, and so on. So another thing to keep in mind as we build our pillar, this is a role we'll need to fill. Marshal at arms, as Justin's well versed in, and we've got a great one in him. Security of the state Jural Assembly, records officers membership during meetings, security of the meeting place prior to and immediately after meetings, and the coordination of the county militia with the state militia, which I didn't. That was new to me. That's an interesting role for the marshal at arms, coordinate between the counties and the state. Anything else you'd like to add about the marshal at arms, Justin?
Not just county to state, but state to other states, like international.
State to state.
So, yeah, it would be, because keep in mind, we're nation states. So we're countries within our state, our borders. And
Okay.
so outside of trade, let's say our militia sets up a trade route with another militia or the International Business Assembly. That would be another part where the marshal at arms would be not so much nosy as respect as hey, you can't do that, blah blah blah, but more of a, for lack of a better term, an escort from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, just to protect our people that have raised their hand to serve. And by protection, I mean safety and kind of like in consulting, you know, so like a battle buddy.
Battle buddy.
Yeah. And then also I'm supposed to be reaching out to like provost marshals, going to National Guard armories, just checking in, saying, hey guys, what's going on? Checking in and out, see things going, just keeping the lines of communication open for members of the assembly to be able to still function in, with that dual hat role. You got people that still work for the state of state as far as firemen and sheriff's deputies that have status corrected. But at night, as Americans, they deserve the same rights as other people that have done the 1779 for Americans and don't have that dual status. So there's a lot behind the scenes. There's a lot behind the scenes. Not to make it look like a almighty title, because that's all these are, titles. It's just things that are needed for us to operate. So pretty much operate on a day-to-day basis to handle court or cases that come to us. And one last thing, keeping in mind, we're going to be busy at the beginning, because not only does the ruling in our courts justify the trespass or justice, but it also nullifies that law at the same time. We send it to them and say, nope, that don't apply to us. And if it don't apply to him, it don't apply to any of us. So let's systematically change that one so we don't have to keep going through this. See? Yeah, man. But I yield.
Thanks for that, Justin. Appreciate it. Any questions on chapter 14, sheriffs, militias, and marshals? Anything else to add? Chapter 15, coroners. This was really interesting. What a position. The only public official who can remove a sitting governor from office. I mean, that's a lot of power. Of all the public offices, the office of the coroner is the office of greatest trust. So, pretty impressive. Coroners must be competently trained medical professionals. However, once again, that dual citizenship. If we're going to have a land and soil coroner, can't have a license. So that's why she says retired doctors and nurses or physician assistants in the military that never used their trade out in the real world. But that license has to be returned. They must be able to certify that a man or woman is dead and give an educated opinion of the cause of death. So that's one of the prerequisites for being a coroner. And the other thing is to record births, land and soil births. So important role, one that we'll have to fill as we stand up our pillar. Any questions on coroners? And did you have any experience or any training in coroners, or do you have anything to add on? And as a nurse by trade.
Well, I had interactions with coroners, you know, from working in the ER, but I've never done what they've done. Although I can tell when someone's been born and when they're have left this earth. My license is, I have not kept my license up intentionally. I let it go in 2021.
So one of the questions I had, it says that you have to be a competently trained medical professional. Well, as we stand up our pillar and we're looking for folks, how would we determine that competency without a license?
Well, like you said, someone could have had a license and let it go and is no longer under their authority. Which is why I let my license go even before I knew about this American State Assembly. I just didn't want to be under that authority anymore.
Justin, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. This goes back to exactly what you mentioned at the beginning, or when I popped on. You was talking about how the split between American and Tory. Well, that's what they did. They actually created a whole nother way of life. And in order to do that, they had to learn as they go. And so as far as the medically the competently trained, I would say that's a decision for the people as a whole to make when they elect that person. You know, hopefully there is 4 or 5 candidates for that position. Hopefully we're that busy. You see?
Yeah.
So we get to make the decision. We vet them. We vet that person to make sure there's no conflict of interest. They are truly status corrected American, and that, you know, if there is something in their background, it can be explained. And so, but what I was wanting to say is that goes back to, that's how we do separate. So a doctor's, you know, I know it's probably a no-brainer for Ann, you know, giving her license up, but most I would say are timid of that decision because of what they're going to do next. Well, if we have a militia of people needing care that a fully trained doctor in their system could provide without all the daggone rules and regulations and the suings and the, you know, the false charges and all this, if we could provide that just like they did for themselves back in the Revolutionary War, that's how this thing works. That's why the General Assembly is the big ball, and the Jural Assembly, the Militia Assembly, and the International Business Assembly are the little balls inside of it that are made up of the populace, not outside people, not Tories. And in fact, that's what they did. If a Tory come into an American community and wasn't willing to learn and adapt and change, see, they gave them the opportunity. They were peaceful and gave everybody the opportunity, individual rights. But when they proved themselves to be the rioters or didn't want to leave the Tory behind, they were shunned. That's where the term tar and feathered came from. They would tar and feather them, make fun of them, make them hate to be a Tory. So I yield.
Well, I let my license go because I didn't want to be under their authority anymore with being told I had to get a vaccine because in order to work. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it took a lot of courage. Anita?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, all these nurses and medical professionals, I mean, they go to school, they pass, they're competent nurses and doctors when they come out of college. You know, just because they don't have a license doesn't mean I mean, the license is just gives them the ability to work at that hospital or county or state. You know, they've already gone through their training. They're competent, to me anyway, they're competent when they come out of college because they pass everything. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you. I yield.
So like a certificate of completion, a diploma, something like that, somebody could show to the vetting committee and show their competence, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, they passed all their tests and everything. They go through their internship and everything, and then they have to apply for a license to work at certain areas. So, I mean, to me, they're already, I mean, I'm sure Ann could, you know, talk about that, but I mean, they went through all the training and the license is just there at the end.
Yeah, the licensing requires a test, you know, that has to be passed, obviously. And it is absolutely impossible if anybody wanted to cheat on it. Whereas, to be honest, there were people I went to nursing school with who cheated their way through school, which I have no idea. You know, it just kind of blows my mind. But and a lot of, yes, when you get out of nursing school or medical school, you have a lot of basic understanding of things, but on the job training is also part of it. So if someone, you know, wanted to work in this capacity, they could always have on the job training here with whoever was the prior coroner, or if there's multiple. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it was just a question I had, how to prove competency, but thanks Anita and Ann for bringing that up, because we're definitely gonna run into that. All right, any questions on chapter 15 corners?
Hey, Tom,
Justin, you hand raised again?
yeah, just real quick. This is just such a great opportunity to pitch the militia inside this and how it could, you know, these questions. Uh, let's say you have, and the vet, you know, the competency would be proven to the people, not necessarily the vetting committee. The vetting committee stance is more like, okay, you want to run for coroner? Okay, you have at it, buddy. We just need to make sure of three things, right? Okay, and then you're the people's. You prove yourself to the people, because this man on Jefferson County is running for coroner at the same time, right? Because we've established elections by then. So the proof wouldn't be proven to the vetting committee; it'd be proven to the people. But and the best candidate would be chosen, I'm sure. But the pitch for the militia is, let's say you have six candidates, one wins, five others don't. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to start teaching our children in schools what actually needs to be taught to set them up for success without all the corporate mandates and all this. And who says you can't be a nurse? You don't have the training. Yeah, I did. My mama and papa trained me in school, right? It sounds farce, but that's what we do. We take our own responsibilities. We don't say we're nurses and stuff like that if we're not, you know. But it goes perfect to where we can teach this stuff in schools. We can teach the right history. We can teach the right medicine. We can teach all this stuff right to our kids at an early age, and that's where the educational part lands in the militia part. But these questions kind of stem from it, so I apologize for kind of going off in the weeds a little bit. But that's how we use our talents that we've been kind of forced into. But God knows what we're good at, or He wouldn't have put us in those situations. We take those talents without all the garbage and use them for prosperity and harmony. So thank you for that opportunity. I yield.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. That the competency is proven to the people, not necessarily to a vetting committee. That's really good to emphasize. So it's going to be up to the Jural Assembly to determine whether or not that person is competent. All right, chapter 16, notaries. Our land, soil, jurisdiction public notaries are confirmed in office as elected public officials. They use stamps and red ink. Their C jurisdiction public notaries are commissioned as officers of their private state-of-state corporations, they use seals and blue ink. Our public notaries process and witness and transfer the public records of the county, the state, and the people. Each actual public notary elected should be rigorously trained in due process proceedings and supplied with a red ink public notary stamp. Then Anna says that the Jural Assemblies are free to accept and adopt unique logos for their use for the notaries, and should formally do so while in session, record the images, and attach a small copyright and a circle copyright notice to the artwork or design that the recorder and notaries are using to stamp their paperwork. Now, I know we have quite a few notaries that have been trained. Anything that's come about as far as a logo or anything for the stamp? Anything in regard to this? Like
We have our
Laura,
notary stamps. It's pretty much just got our name in Kentucky on it, but we didn't really pick it. I guess Belinda did when she ordered the stamps.
okay. How was that training, that due process? What did that entail, Laura, the due process proceeding training? You have any information on that?
In Christie's meeting, we're supposed to be going over that Monday. So,
Justin, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just got some information on the stamps. So the stamps have been chosen by people prior to us. It's been voted on, so that's what they decided to provide for the notary stamps. So I guess what Anna's speaking of is the Jural Assembly will have their own design that makes them specific. So when anything is stamped from the courts, that whatever other jurisdiction within the assembly, I guess you would say, would know that's from our courts, right? And so you can even break it down to a state Jural Assembly stamp, and then counties would have their own Jural Assembly stamps. Because keep in mind, everything is mirrored at the state and county level. Every pillar, everything. General Assembly is the same at the county as it is the state. It's just much more field at the county level and more action at the county level because it's a constant. That's where we live. That's where we interact with each other, right? At the state level, it's more handling Lincoln County's cases on the international level, right? Lincoln County's got a problem with Bull County, or somebody, that jurisdiction. And then, also at the state, you're handling grand jury cases and stuff like that. And then so each pillar would have their own stamp, I guess. I could be far fetched in that. Are you?
So thanks for that, because I didn't think about that, but I think what you're saying and what she's saying is that the Jural Assembly could break out their paperwork uniquely with their own stamp. So that makes more sense.
Well, with findings, findings that are okay, because in our courts, really, we bring a claim against a corporate entity. Well, our courts go through a process before it actually goes to court. And I don't want to draw this out, but the process is arbitration first to see if it can be remedied out of court. Okay.
Yeah.
So before it even gets to court, the two parties have already signed an arbitration agreement or whatever it's called. I don't know. That's a title, but some sort of document saying, okay, we both agreed to the terms. Let's go cast the dice. Let's see how it plays out. And however it plays out, I'll agree to it. And so if the judgment goes for the American and the corporate entity, that document has to go as proof somewhere. So that's would be my guess where that stamp would come into play, right? As
Okay.
This is final type stamp, that type thing. Or
Okay.
notices, you know. Also the icon we use, the General Assembly logo that we use with the state outline and the cardinal and all that, that's what's inside of our public notary stamps.
Okay.
Okay. And it says International Notarial Witness in it. So that's just a design that was used. They took that vote on that main seal and voted to put it in with this in the notary seal. So that's where that all came from. A little bit of history. I yield.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Laura, did you have your hand raised? You put it down.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if the notary training that we got, like, would I be able to be a notary for the Jural Assembly and just have a different stamp?
I think you might be thinking of it as I don't know. I think your notary stamp is your notary stamp because most of the records come from the General Assembly. When somebody status corrects, we're supposed to keep 3 copies actually of records, paper records. One at the county. The county is responsible for each man or woman. The state's responsible for each man and woman on each county. And the Jural Assembly is responsible for each member within that assembly. Not everybody in the Jural Assembly, but you need to have physical records, which is status correction records, proving that they're Americans to go along with their membership agreements, stuff like that, you know, which was outlined in, I think, chapters 2 and 3, maybe. I can't remember what chapter specifically, but sorry to draw out the answer. I think you're thinking right, but I think one stamp is a status correction stamp. It's going to be on most people's documents. And the Jural Assembly stamp, the best of my knowledge, would be used for, like I said, on notices as a image that you could copy and paste as a letterhead, or in a physical red stamp because of the land and soil jurisdiction, making it final. This is the judgment. And then from our courts, it goes to our banks to where the settlement can come to us in gold and silver or whatever asset we want. So it's all fluid. Everything Anna's working on is for the greater fluidity and workings of a state assembly. So from the courts goes to the banks and instantly with the QRC codes and the trade banks and the 2 banks, instant. If that, as soon as it's judgment in our courts, with the corporation having all the money, we get to liquidate whatever asset in your favor, and that's where the Continental Marshals come in. That, along with if we deem a corporation that's been chartered on the state, and this is in the court level, if the courts deem that a corporation, say Amazon, is set up in Kentucky and they're putting out all kinds of pollutants, and we find out it's going in the plains, going in the chemtrails, that's far fetched. But I'm trying to make it far fetched so you can kind of follow the dog trail. And if our courts deem that Amazon is not doing it, we give them notice. And if they don't come under the public law, we unask them from Kentucky and we use their building for what we need it for.
Yeah.
That's actually how it's supposed to work. So not only do our courts provide remedy for individuals, it provides remedy for us for protection from corporate oversight and corporate all this stuff. So it's really deep. It's very deep. So
I don't think you're too far fetched on the Amazon stuff.
yeah, I know. I mean, that's what we're here for. So they should be paying to get rid of that stuff. Maybe it's not Amazon, but there's tons of corporations here that are not, they're going under what happened in 1960, like you mentioned. So I'll yield.
I'm glad you brought up that thing about the banks, because I'm sure there are places that are going to want to see that paperwork has been through our Jural Assembly, and so that unique Kentucky Jural Assembly stamp on that paperwork would show someone that's gone through the proper channels. I suppose.
Yes, and that reminds me too. That also reminds me another application that could be used for just kind of brainstorming is because that's why the litigation is so important. It's not necessarily the litigation committee, I beg your pardon, that Laura speaks of. It's really good at teaching you individual kung fu in their world, due process, paperwork, paperwork. So it's a due process from you to them, okay? That they're trespassing against you. And that's why they're so anal on paperwork in the litigation committee. Don't necessarily come into the assembly so much because on the assembly level, it has to be voted on before we can just take it, and it can be discussed through committees and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. But um that's good because to have a case in our courts, you have to have your three notices. You have to have your notice of liability, your notice of fault with the opportunity to cure, and your notice of claim, and your true bill, and your lien. You have to have your agricultural lien established. And then you have all that, nothing more. You don't need Bob's side of the story or Sarah's side of the story. You don't need all that crap. You've got it all in your due process. That's why it's so important to be on those litigation committees and form one for ourselves so that we can help people get that process under their belt and be able to get on a computer, create a new folder, get a PDF of everything, put it in that folder, how to label it by your registered mail or whatever you use. See, I'm kind of going off in the weeds, and I beg your pardon, but to be able to have that paperwork, it makes that court system run so much smoother because we're not sitting litigating it out. You've given the corporation due process, and an example is Danville Pediatrics and Primary Care. Back in 2020, my son was born, and 3 days later, they put him through the ringer on COVID. Long story short, finally, like a month ago, they called me and said they're going to bring in a third party debt collector on that bill for all that service for that unknown virus. So being the litigation committee and being involved on those calls got me prepared. And I did that a year and a half ago, begging for this opportunity for them to come at me for what they did to my son. But that's another story. But long story short, I did two notices, and I got a reply from the office of Danville Pediatrics. I didn't talk to them one time. I did it all through administrative process, registered mail. Second notice, they sent me something with proof saying it had been right off as a loss, every bit of it. Right? So the right people that need to know this know this. It's not the secretary calling you saying, well, we're going to call in third party. If I would have talked to her, I said, well, good, that's what I've been waiting on. Daggone, let's get it on. So the opportunity's out there to peacefully defend yourself. There's no arguing with the judge. Yes, they don't hear it in their system because they're not supposed to. They're doing their job. Okay, they're doing their job to a T. They're ignoring the piss out of you. That's why it's so important for our court to sit up and stand up. And the first person will be busy as heck all day long for about a year, 2 years to get all the crap settled, and then 2 more years to get all the laws nullified. It's like a systematic change, right? And that's at the state level. And at the county level, it's constant. It's like a business, the county courts. At the state level, eventually we get to a system of harmony with the other Tories that choose to be Tories, right? And we live our American way with our American system that we have established. It's going to take some bumps and bruises to get there, but we're going to get there. I know it because I've seen the people that's come into the assembly, and everybody's amazing. Everybody's amazing with the individual stories that they have and the power that they bring to that testimony through action. So I'll get off the soapbox, but yes, that's why it's important for us to do those notices and don't just chuck it off as as, okay, yeah, I'll just pay it. No, you know, most of that debt is most of that debt is unsecured debt. So they can't come after you for it anyway, even if you was still a United States citizen. All right. They can't come after your house. It's unsecured debt. But I apologize for going off on the weeds and um I yield.
No, I appreciate it. Give us a better, little clearer picture of how it's all supposed to work later on down the road once we start setting up the pillar. So that's all good. Thanks. All right, moving on. Chapter 17, clerks and bondsmen. Clerks recognize the kind of action being pursued and the nature of the people or the persons pursuing it to correctly direct it to the appropriate jurisdiction and court. So the clerk is basically, what's it called? Telephone, the operator. Basically, the clerk brings the information in, sorts it out, and says, all right, this case needs to go to this court, this jurisdiction. So being able to differentiate different kinds of jurisdiction and what court it needs to go to. And it says a good court clerk can determine the jurisdiction of a case from determining the capacity in which parties to a case are acting, the nature of the controversy, and what it involves as subject matter. They observe the facts versus offer legal advice. Legal advice is what they do in de facto. Our county clerks observe the facts. They maintain meticulous records of all the paperwork involved in a case. And Anna mentions that paralegals, once they're properly retrained, course corrected, I guess, paralegals would be good clerks for us. And Anna mentions that land and soil courts keep records while C jurisdiction courts keep files. Bondsmen. Bondsman is the land counterpart to bailiffs. They take charge of prisoners, ensure their safety and good conduct while in court, maintain security of the courtroom, and instruct people on how to post bonds. Justin said the clerk is where my paperwork due process against the pirates goes, and the clerk of court sends it to the right court that's established. So that makes sense. The clerk is responsible for sending it to the right spot. The bondsman instructs people on how to post bonds. They witness official paperwork. They confirm the bond roster for each day the court is in session. He secures and locks the safe containing the bond fees. And this was probably the most important part to me about the bondsman. Anna says that the bondsman in a court is meant to be a reassuring figure for those participating in or witnessing the proceedings, as well as a stalwart protector of everyone concerned. So I kind of had the picture of the Rock, somebody of a large stature being the bondsman in there to keep the peace, give everybody a comfortable feeling of when we're in court there. So any questions on clerks and bondsmen? Anything to add? Chapter 18, jurors and citizenship. About jurors, Anna mentions that the juror is the fundamental, unelected, voluntary office underlying the authority of our states, that of the juror, a member of the state Jural Assembly. By joining the state Jural Assembly, you are agreeing to serve as a juror and act in the capacity of a state citizen. The fundamental office of juror is accepted as a duty and is not elected. I will say one thing about that middle bullet about being a state citizen. I think that only applies if the case crosses a border. I think you can be a state national, be a member of the jury as long as it's just in the state. As long as it's just a Kentucky event case, that you can remain just a state national. Who can serve as a juror? Anyone born on the soil of one of the states and who forswears all foreign allegiances, That brings up dual citizenship once again. If you're going to serve as a juror, you must voluntarily give up any attachment to a foreign government, any licenses and things of that nature. What does a qualified juror do? They form the jury pool for your state. They hear court cases as a trial juror. They participate in bringing charges as a member of a grand jury. And she says the most important function of a juror that our state jural assemblies and jurors perform is jury nullification. When I first read that, I thought that meant that they just eliminated other juries. But come to find that really means that the jury has the ability to eliminate any corporate statutes that they don't like. Anna mentioned Title 37 earlier in the book, that once we have a jury set up, nationwide, we could eliminate Title 37, the whole birth certificate issue. So eliminating statutes and codes that we don't like, that's the jury. That's the nullification capacity of the jury. She says it's designed to prune overreaching legislative activity on the part of our employees. So eliminating the bad stuff. The discussion of citizenship in chapter 18, the biggest thing I pulled out of that was just the difference between a state national and a state citizen. I didn't really see any more to discuss about that the state national has no official capacity, no particular duty to serve their state, whereas a state citizen, we're serving our assembly. Questions on chapter 18? Chapter 19 is titled The Public and Organic Law. She says the public law of this country has not been enforced in any organized and comprehensive fashion for at least 50 years. That was surprising to me. That we've basically just been living under de facto corporate statutes, codes, nothing organic, nothing that we're supposed to be for at least 50 years. And what we have now is an appearance of justice provided by private corporate courts. Go ahead, Justin.
Yep, that goes directly to what you was talking about in 1960. That's when Anna says they started one by one taking out the land and soil recording offices out of the counties like lanterns. They started blowing them out one by one, giving us no place to record our births, giving us no place to file our claims. And then you try and take your paperwork, just your 928 documents, a cancellation of a power of attorney. You try taking that to the county clerk of a corporate system right now, and they'll look at you like you're a clown. I mean, I've been shot at and bombed, and I never was so nervous as to go in there and try and have them file my documents. I swear, it's crazy, man, the adrenaline rush in this stuff, because you just know it's real and you're standing up for it. I totally get it. So for sake of going off in the weeds, talesmen too, at the county level, is my understanding, a talesman is, if that person's not status corrected but is well known in that community, they can vouch for another individual. They can sit on juries. And Anita might know the case that's referenced that Terry and Anna talk about all the time. But talesman, that's some research too. It's a well-known case that a guy used status corrected or non-status corrected, but Americans as his witnesses or juries, I think. But anyway, I yield.
Thanks, Justin. So these private corporate courts can only address persons, corporations, and so that's going down that whole discussion of the birth certificate, their all capital name, and how we get there, and taking that back to part of our coming back to the land and soil. So those courts only address persons, the all caps name. And that's where they get us, the registrations. That's how they get us hooked. The registrations allow them to presume that we are volunteering to act as corporate franchises. You have your hand raised again, Justin?
No, I'm sorry. I forgot to take it
Oh,
down.
okay. Look up the Clearfield Doctrine. I've heard of that. But
Yeah,
go ahead.
it's a doctrine that says that any corporation cannot rule against a man or a woman declared. So if you take that into account, if all the governments are acting as corporations, then any government can't talk to us pretty much, or to trespass. The Clearfield Doctrine, it's really, really good.
So that's basically what you got underlined there. She says that they have no authority to address living man or woman. So good information. So what is our recourse against these private corporate courts? State Jural Assembly, what we're doing today, what we're planning on doing at some point, building our pillar. The State Jural Assembly are the instruments we need to enforce the public and organic law, which stands above all private corporate forms of what they call law, their statutes, codes. So once we're up and operating, we're over all of that, which is pretty exciting. Anita.
I'm sorry, did I have my hand up?
Yeah,
Sorry. Sorry.
that's okay. Questions on chapter 19? Chapter 20 is a discussion about the jurisdiction of the people. 3 basic jurisdictions, air, land, and sea. And inside of those, there's 3 capacities. It can be unincorporated, corporate, or incorporated. That basically gives you 9 different basic combinations. But fortunately for us, Anna says we only need to be able to pinpoint and manage the 2 jurisdictions that we are responsible for, right? Soil and the land. Soil being the first top 6 inches, and the land being that underneath it at international capacity. And be able to direct your employees. That's at some point they're going to be our employees, and we're going to tell them how we want the affairs handled. So land, soil, and then once we have that, we have to be able to tell those people that are working for us how we want things done. So this is really the last slide I've got, and it's a good way to finish it off. Anna says the jurisdiction of the people on the land and soil of their states is absolute, unincorporated, and sovereign. The unincorporated county and state court juries, that's going to be what we're going to be, have the ability to nullify any corporate rule, regulation, federal code, and can keep these foreign statutes and codes from being applied to any of the people of this country. That's an incredible jurisdiction and responsibility, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be status corrected and have the ability to be a part of this. So, questions on chapter 20, the jurisdiction? All right. Questions, comments, anyone would like to discuss further? Anything I missed or wasn't clear on? Next training week from today, Sunday at 7, but Laura mentioned that maybe a 6 o'clock start time would be better. Is that a problem for anyone? That Deron could join us?
I'd like to check with my husband first, but I think it would be okay.
Okay.
We probably want to ask Duran too, if that would, since he's not present, if that would accommodate him before we make the change.
All right, I'll
If
just
we don't
send a
want to
text
move it
out.
to 6 and him not still be able to come.
Yeah. I'll send a text out to the group and see if 6 o'clock works, and if that's agreeable, we'll just do that. I appreciate y'all being here. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, please reach out to me via text, email, give me a phone call. Love to chat. Thanks, Justin, for being here. Thanks for your input and your wisdom. And have a good week, everyone. See you next
Thanks.
week.
Thanks
Thanks,
for your
Tom.
preparation and work.
Yeah,
Oh,
Tom,
okay.
thank you for the time that you put in getting that prepared. I know what goes into it. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, my pleasure. It's always good to learn. Like Anna says in the book a couple of times, our ignorance is our greatest enemy.
Well,
And
in 3 years' time, everybody will be able to give wisdom to others. So
yeah,
it's nothing special. It's just I happen to come on a little earlier. So thank you all for letting me join, and thanks for putting up with me. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
Thanks,
Thanks
Justin.
for coming.
See you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Good night, Ann.
Good night.
Tell Drew I said hey.
Hey,
Tom. Hey, Drew.
Can you hear him? Hey, I have a
Yeah.
question that's totally unrelated.
Okay.
Any chance I could, would you be able to drop off that stuff with Todd that belongs to Amelia so she could swing by there and pick it up?
Oh, yeah.
Would you have
Yeah,
time
no
to do that before you go out of town, or is that? She just texted me and said, and asked me, she said she could just get it from Todd.
Yeah, I should have got it back to you.
No, it's okay. I mean,
I should have got it to you yesterday. I don't know why we didn't do that.
well, I wasn't there yesterday, so I couldn't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can have Meg bring it to you or something.
Either to me or Todd, I don't care. Yeah, tomorrow will be a hard day for me to meet up because I have that visitation.
Okay.
Yeah. So the
Uh-huh.
only, okay, I have a question. It's gonna sound so silly about this, but the only people that we can defend in the de facto legal system are people who have actually decided to step into the land and soil jurisdiction, not anybody that's still in their system. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. What we're gonna do is only gonna apply to status corrected people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked is because, I had Rowan in the car today and he was talking to his dad and his grandmother. I didn't tell you this yet, Drew. He said, first of all, he said, please don't call the police on me. And Devin was like, what do you mean? And he said, I'm going to tell you something, but if I tell you I could get in trouble, I don't want you to call the police. And he said, well, what is it? I'm not going to call the police. What are you talking about? So apparently, long story short, he told Devin, he said,
Hold on, before you go, whenever this is being recorded, I'm not
oh,
sure if you
oh,
want
yes, I thought, oh, sorry. I thought
to
you'd
go
already
out
seen
to
it. I'm so
the
sorry.
world.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'll wait till you end recording.
I don't know that I can do that.
Okay, I'll just call you on my phone.
Oh, okay. All
Okay,
right.
sorry.
I'll see you.
I'll
Okay.
call you right now. Okay, bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll tell you both at the same time.